coming to you on Tuesday, this April 7th. What's been happening? Yesterday, I was just did a bunch of traveling. I drove home from Ottawa, so I didn't have much of a chance to do anything. Kind of like on Good Friday, I was driving to Ottawa, so that there was that. Um, we have a good bit of a show for you. I'm going to start off with the Grok thing, and then I'm going to react to a Promethean Action video that dropped last night that I think is very interesting. It's from the Promethean Action Pack people, and the guy who's doing that is very had a lot more stuff to say, especially about the space race that I know I've been covering a fair amount, and I've been trying to get into a bit more of the space stuff as well. So, but before we begin, I'll go through the Grok script. I think I'm going to just drop these descriptions. Basically, it's a lot of work to go through them. So welcome to the Spy Guide channel, where we don't chase headlines. We dissect the operations, the backroom deals, the intelligence blind spots, the raw power calculations that decide whether America comes out stronger or weaker. I'm David March. And today, April 7, 2026, the board is on fire. We're in a week 6 of Operation Epic Fury, the U.S.-Israel campaign that started Feb 28th with strikes that took out Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and gutted Iran's military machine. The Strait of Hormuz is still contested. Oil prices are spiking. Trump just renewed threats to demolish every power plant and bridge in Iran if the strait doesn't reopen by tonight. I think the strait is opening by tonight, and that's why he made that weird, insane comment that's freaking everyone out on the internet. He's going to use nuclear weapons. He's going to do it. It's like, no, he made that thing because they have a deal already. We'll see if I'm right tonight or not. He might just do another one of his backdowns. But my feeling is they probably have a deal in place to get it. That being said, we've all known that I've been saying that opening the strait is not necessarily in the best interest of the United States. Meanwhile, back channel talks are leaking. NATO is grumbling, and China and Russia are watching from the cheap seats. That's true. They are definitely at the cheap seats. This isn't about democracy versus dictatorship or good versus evil. This is realist territory. Does this war advance core U.S. interests, energy security, preventing a nuclear Iran, maintaining global deterrence without bleeding us dry or handing advantages to our real competitors? And by us, I think of them I look at more of North American continents. So Canada gets a role there, and I mean, we're on the spaceship, so there's something. Things not quite as divided as some people would say. 3 deep dive segments today. We'll run the numbers on the Iran Endgame, map the ripple effects of alliance and energy, and stress test Trump's America First realism against the hard realities of great power competition. No spin, just the field road. Let's get into the ops room agents. Okay. Iran War Endgame, realist calculus on cost gains and exit ramps. Let's start with the kinetic reality on the ground. Operation Epic Fury launched with nearly 900 strikes in the first 12 hours. Khamenei and top regime figures are gone. Iran's air defenses, missile stockpiles, and naval assets are degraded. In the case of the Navy, they're destroyed. Some reports 80 to 90% on key systems. Iranian retaliation continues to hit Israel, Gulf states, and even U.S. assets, but it was messy and costly for them. And for all this talk by Tucker about all the neighbor countries in the region being pissed off, everything I can tell coming down the line is that Saudi Arabia and most of the Gulf states want Iran to be gone. They are tired of this nuclear race. They're tired of this thing. They want this gone, and we're using this as an air campaign similar to what we saw in Bosnia Herzegovina in the 90s. So that is kind of where I see this. From a realist lens, the opening phase delivered. It smashed Iran's ability to threaten the region with nukes or proxies in the near term. Oh yeah, we need to get rid of those proxies. That serves U.S. interests. A nuclear Iran would have forced every Gulf state into its own arms race and giving China a new lever over global energy. Deterrence restored. Check. And what is it? Let me say, yeah, proxies have been really going down. Houthi, I just learned this from a podcast last week, or I was listening to on Friday. Houthi signed a deal with Trump after the military operation, and it says American ships can move through the Red Sea unimpeded, but they still get to shoot at Israeli ships. So what does that mean? It means that Trump is not under Israel's control, and all this BS narrative out there is garbage, just a giant psyop that people are falling into. Everyone is always like, let's blame the Jews. But realism demands we ask the hard follow-ups. What now? Trump's latest threat, total demolition of civilian infrastructure, isn't cleared by 8 p.m. Eastern, is a classic maximum pressure. It's designed to force an off-ramp on U.S. terms, yet closing the strait has already spiked oil prices and handed a propaganda win to Tehran's new interim leadership. My angle, intelligence shows Iran is playing for time. They floated indirect talks via Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkey. A 45-day ceasefire is phase one of a two-phase deal. There are conditions, reparations, some control over Hormuz tolls in yuan. That's not weakness. That's bargaining from a position of asymmetric leverage. They know we don't want a prolonged occupation or nation building, Siebel. And I can see that being a deal where, that is like drop the reparation stuff, and you do get this toll on Hormuz. That could be an interesting idea to explore. Realist assessment, full regime change sound good on paper, but power vacuum risk fragmentation that could spawn worse actors. Warlords, ISIS 2.0, or China's Russian footholds. That's one thing I've been thinking about is someone said, I think it was Tom Long who pointed out, oh yeah, by the way, or maybe it was Blaine Holt. But by the way, when the United States leaves, who's going to march in there, Europe? You really want China to take over? Because they could and would. Where was I? No boots on the ground, no forever war. And we saw that in that incredible, crazy raid to get the 2 pilots out. I'm not entirely convinced it was all the assets used there. This raid to rescue the soldiers might have been cover for a different operation. But I've been told by Richard Swank that that's definitely not what happened. They went in there with maximum efforts, and almost all the planes that were destroyed were planes are on the chopping block. They were going to be demobilized. I've talked about, me and Richard Swank have talked about this stuff. And so go back and watch those episodes if you really want to know about what the Air Force is doing here. He retired a major in the American Air Force. What they're not telling you, the real prize isn't democracy in Iran. It's reopening Hormuz without U.S. forces becoming the permanent cop on the beat. Every extra week of disruption costs American consumers at the pump and erodes domestic support. Realism says declare the military objectives met, pivot to diplomacy that locks in sanctions relief only after verifiable denuclearization, and walk away with the win. Listen, note, if Trump follows through on power plant strikes tonight, watch the global reaction that could accelerate talks or turn this into a broader regional meat grinder. Next up, energy shockwaves, alliance into the Strait of Hormuz game. Also, I just want to put in there, if you like this stuff, like, share, and subscribe. Go to my locals thing and start engaging there. Help me out. Let me grow this channel a bit. Have some fun. Now zoom out to the economic and alliance chessboard. The strait carries 20% of global oil. Iran's blockade, even partial, is a classic realist power move, weaponized choke points. Trump floated seizing the strait outright for a gusher of oil. That's raw interest-based thinking. Secure the resources, deny it to adversaries. But realism cuts both ways. Gulf allies are quietly relieved Iran's missile threat is gone, yet they're not rushing to join U.S. strikes, mainly because you don't want these guys joining your strikes. They're not very good. most of these guys are royalists. The Air Force is considered the glamour position. There's a bit of a case system in the Middle East, and only the pilot. It's not the best pilots to get those jobs. It's the son of the princes. We saw something similar happen in Argentina back in the day. Realism cuts both ways. They remember Iraq, they remember Libya. They want U.S. to guarantee security without asking to front the blood or the bill. Well, I think they agreed to pay the bill at least. NATO is a bigger fracture line. Trump has reportedly raised withdrawing if allies don't help clear the strait. Yep, realist truth. NATO has been a one-way subsidy for too long. European free ride on U.S. defense spending while buying Russian gas and Chinese solar panels was never sustainable, forcing burden sharing and smart power politics, but timing matters. Alienated allies mid-crisis hands Russia and China's narrative wins. Yeah, as I said before, I believe in ARC, America, Russia, China. I see a lot of stuff going on here in the background that doesn't always come out of Grok stuff. Hidden layer. Watch the financial trails. Yep. Iran is reportedly accepting yuan for oil tolls. That's Beijing's long game, de-dollarization in real time. Every barrel that bypasses a petrodollar weakens U.S. leverage. I don't know. I think a lot of people would like to get out of the U.S. dollar, out of that currency. It would allow them to become a real economy again. Meanwhile, U.S. energy independence, thanks to domestic production, plus the Venezuelan oil that Trump secured, gives us options Europe and Asia don't have. Realism says use that leverage. Let allies feel the pain, then offer them discounted U.S. LNG and security aid in exchange for real contributions. Yep, that's what we're going to do, what we're looking down the barrel of here. Bottom line, the Strait crisis exposes the fragility of global energy interdependence. A realist U.S. policy doesn't police the world's shipping lanes forever. It builds alternatives, pipelines, Arctic routes, domestic surge capacity, and make disruption too costly for any single actor to attempt again. Go over here. I have people in the chat. Hey, JP. No, I will not be going for the full 4 hours. Darth Byron. I will not be going. I'll do about an hour and a half usually. So I'll be doing this in a reaction video to a thing. But yeah, I've started using Grok to make my and some other tools to start using my making my thumbnails now. So it won't be just a classic one. I think it'll start to look pretty good. Anyways, where was I? Back to Grok. Yep. The bottom line, the Strait crisis exposes the fragility. Yep, I just covered that. Yeah, I was talking to my stepbrother over Easter, and he's in the Canadian Armed Forces, and they're really starting to look for alternatives to, like, they're really looking at building up all of the continental defenses where the policy's going, using all the stuff that's going to be based up north. And then I told them about these, they're like, if these small modular reactors can help us out. I'm like, yeah, the SMRs can help out, but also we're looking at all this stuff that they're going to be using in the space program, where you have nuclear generators capable of making, like, basically submarine engines. And those can be used to power bases in the north and on the moon, and Mars. So that's where we're kind of going here. Final topic from the script: Trump's America First Realism versus Great Power Competition. Finally, the big picture test. How does this Iran episode fit Trump's broader foreign policy realism in a world defined by China and Russia? On the plus side, prioritizing tangible U.S. interests over abstract rules-based order is textbook realism. Venezuelan oil deal. Tariffs are negotiating tools. Pressuring NATO. These are moves that treat foreign policy as business, not charity. Iran strikes signal to Beijing. We will act decisively when core interests, energy flows, non-proliferation are threatened. This is all stuff Peter Zeon was talking right before COVID happened. And then I went further down the rabbit hole. But yeah, these are things you got to understand. This has been coming for a while. The breakup of the globe, globalism is dead. But we're just going through the process. But realism also demands restraint where costs outweigh gains. Russia is bleeding in Ukraine and watching U.S. tie down resources in the Middle East. That's a gift to Moscow. China is facing threat, expanding nuclear forces, dominating critical minerals, and waiting for the U.S. to overextend. Every day we're focused on Hormuz as the day Xi advances in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait. I think what the real competition is going to be going on in the moon. My take, the real intelligence failure would be treating Iran in isolation. This conflict is a sideshow in the great power contest. Right. A smart realist exit keeps the win, degraded Iranian threat, reorients resources toward Asia, and avoids the trap becoming the regional stabilizer while adversaries consolidate elsewhere. Trump style. Profane threats, rapid pivots, personal deal-making is high variance realism. It can force breakthroughs where bureaucracy stalls. It can also create unnecessary enemies. To test over the next weeks, can the administration convert military gains into a durable off-ramp that secures U.S. energy and deterrence without open-ended commitments? Yes, I think that's where this is going. That's kind of the advantage of some of these goals that he's limited. He can just declare victory at any time. And that's the Realist Field Report for April 7, 2026 on the Spy Game channel. The Iran war isn't about ideology. It's about power, resources, and long-term American advantage. Do we advance the national interest, or are we drifting to another quagmire? Drop your takes in the comments. Is maximum pressure working, or should we cut the best deal available and pivot to China? Subscribe, hit notifications, stay sharp. The shadows never sleep. And I'm going to do my reaction video now. I have the rose. I know, right? If only that's a great comment. Thank you, Knight of the Rose. An idea. If only there was somewhere near to the U.S. that could provide energy to the U.S. and Europe. If only the leaders could put their elbows down and get their head out of their ass. Yeah, well, I can tell you on that one, we're building a lot of nuclear power plants here in Ontario, and we don't need Ottawa's permission to do that. My premier decides to build it. He's going to build a bunch of new nuclear power plants, and he plans on selling the energy to the United States. He's already got deals worked up through New York and some other places. So that's the kind of indication. In 2 years, we will have the first small modular reactor in Canada. And we're planning also to export that technology around the world. So that's where we're going with a lot of stuff. And also, hey, JP, good to see you. Okay, now where is the share button? Share screen. Yes, this is the right one.
Strategic update on Monday nights. I'm your host tonight, Mike Stager. I'll be joined for discussions with Keisha Rogers. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit like and subscribe, and sign up for our email list so you can join these discussions live on Monday nights on Zoom. Thanks everyone for getting on tonight. Incredibly intense and kind of wild world. I think we've got to start from where the tension is the greatest, and that's probably not the moon right now, as much as that's still up in the air. They're on the far side right now, and it's kind of an incredible, to me, compositional difference. You have America putting mankind back into the business of exploring the heavens, of looking out into the universe with hope and courage and joy for the future. And then we're dealing with this kind of pit of hell back here on Earth from these festering problems that we've been dealing with for now over 50 years. And you see the relationship. I mean, I know some people do, and maybe some of you on the call tonight believe we didn't go to the moon. And I fully respect that opinion because it's more.
It totally went to the moon. We should know Alice went to the moon.
More insane to think that we did go and stopped than to think we never went at all. But the reality is that if we stopped going and then we allowed the globalists to take over because they shut down the space program, and then they launched these problems like this kind of Muslim Brotherhood, Islamism, ideological takeover of the Middle East. If they broke open the kind of cocaine cartels and the drug smuggling and the drug culture in the United States, all of that went in hand in hand. And so literally they were looking to create hell on earth and blocking us from doing what mankind has been destined to do, which is explore the heavens. It's what we do best, whether it's theologically, philosophically, or directly into now advanced human exploration into the stars. It's when we are at our best, when we're challenging a society upwards out of the hell that oftentimes we create for ourselves. And that's what's happened here. So Trump has continued the march on a reindustrial.
Yeah, it's kind of like before the Revolutionary War, one of the big complaints about against the king and the government there was the fact that they closed the frontier to Americans, and they in order to encourage people to settle in Ontario, and people didn't want to settle in Ontario; they wanted to settle continue the march across the prairies. So this is kind of like, this is what they did to us in outer space terms. They cut us off from a practical use of the orbit. There's things we could be doing up in the sky, unbelievable things, space, solar power satellites, various lunar mining. They don't want us to get to all the gold in the asteroids. They don't want us to disrupt their systems, because they have their system of control through oil energy, and the old mining systems. Yeah, thanks. Yep. Thanks, Night of the Rose, 98. Yeah, so we're just going along for this ride here. But yeah, that's what they want. They've closed us off from our natural destiny to get to the stars, because they just want to be greedy for themselves. And they're worried that once we get off planet, we won't need them anymore.
Industrialization program of the United States. It's not going to be perfect. What's going to happen with this whole AI structure? Some of these AI companies, there's a lot of people just promote, and there's things that aren't functioning there. But that's not really where the traction is being made. The traction is made largely in the manufacturing sector, getting these factories built, getting people employed in production again. The tariffs are having an effect. And any country with 1.5 eyes open can see we're not reversing this tariff trend. The pressure is going to be there. Maybe it won't be as enforced with some knucklehead Democrat back in the White House at some point. But the reality is, knuckleheads is the kind version of a Democrat, I guess. But the reality is we're shifting. But when you look at the situation, you realize that Trump he can't accelerate that much more. I mean, rebuilding our manufacturing and industrial base requires just slow, patient, deliberate investments, construction, getting the jobs open, forcing the issue on the power plants. Like one AI company said, "Oh, you were serious about us having to build the power plant?" It's like, yeah, dude. Build your own power plant. You guys have the money. Build the power plant. So at least the country gets power plants out of this.
Yeah, the country's getting power plants. You're also getting the fact that there's been very interesting developments involving like land use, people buying up. I was hearing about in Pennsylvania, this one county, where they bought up a bunch of forest that's basically a state park, and because it was located right next to the nuclear power plant. So they're basically, there is, sometimes they want to build their own power plants, and sometimes they're going to get as close to the power plant as possible, because the further along your transmission is, the less power you're going to get.
Depending on how much the AI boom is really meets the ground, meets the road. But we have these festering problems. I just saw the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia do a brief video discussing the role Iran has played, where Obama literally did give Iran $150 billion, I think $1.5 billion in cash. Trump has reported on this recently and said Obama literally sucked all of the cash out of DC, Virginia, and Maryland, all of the banks, to load it up on one of these big transport planes. Like, um,
he also sent a bunch of various other currencies as well, as I recall. Swiss francs, euros, all these different types of money. Perfect. All this cash because, Iran is going to use it to finance terrorists.
to give it to Iran in cold American cash. And the Crown Prince's criticism was Iran didn't build any roads or industrial centers. There was no building up of Iran as a people, as a country, as an industrial civilization. It was increasing the support for terrorism. Osama bin Laden's son now lives in Iran. He's hosted in Iran and is, I guess, working to become the leader of Al-Qaeda again. So these ongoing British, globalist, Islamic, ideological games keep being played, and the festering zone for all of this is, of course, Iran. Other nations have had connections to the Muslim Brotherhood. Certainly Qatar has had that. I mean, the Wahhabism of Saudi Arabia was never something that was, a greatest, highest form of Islam. But the reality is Iran has become the leading problem child. And what you see with it is a kind of dynamic of the martyred liberal, the perpetual victim, the one that always can get third worlders and people that have come to the conclusion that somehow we have to write off the United States, scrap it. The United States has become intrinsically a failed and immoral state, and write it off. These are what we call the third worlders or internationalists. We now have to move to an international structure. We have to just support the third world countries because they've just been so harmed by this American brutality. And it's like, well, if it was just American brutality, then you'd think the American people would be like thriving. We were just brutalizing everybody else and just making such great gains for ourselves. That might be true for a class. The jet-setting globalist class might have thought this globalist era was wonderful, but for the majority of Americans, it's sucked an egg many times over. It just hasn't functioned. We saw much of our society be torn down, our cities get destroyed, a massive wave of immigration of replacement. The H-1B visa thing just is infuriating on so many different levels. And so there's this weird media complex that's challenging that anything the United States does is somehow a problem. But what we know from President Trump is he's confronting this dynamic in Iran. And he's like, we've got to solve this. We can't leave this for future. He said that today in the press conference. We cannot leave this for some other person to basically be taken advantage of in the position of presidency of the United States. This problem has to be solved. And the question is then, how do we solve it? Well, preferably we get this nation into some kind of dialogue. In my mind, I can't help but go back to Kim Jong-un. Trump wanted a dialogue with Kim Jong-un. He played some tough, verbal games, and then they had a meeting. And he's to this day, again, in the press conference on this remarkable heroic rescue. I mean, Pete Hegseth said it, but the guy was basically ejected out of a plane on Friday, scrambling, bleeding up into the Iranian mountains with his beacon, his, GPS beacon on him. And on Sunday, morning, he's basically, pulled out by this helicopter. The helicopters, the planes are basically all stuck. They can't get out of this airfield. They have to bring in 3 more planes. Remarkable, hundreds of people involved, 50 to 100 planes probably engaged in distraction, engagement, refueling. The whole thing was a massive logistical project. And we rescued both of the pilot and co-pilot out of the F-15 with the last guy out on Sunday morning.
Yeah, compare that to the 13 hours Benghazi disaster where you saw all this JSOC stuff. You watch that movie and you got all this JSOC and all these guys are ready, Ramstein, and everyone's ready to go and nothing happens. They just leave them to die. And it's like just a handful of guys. The guy says, give me a suitcase full of cash and I'll go hire some mercenaries and I'll go rescue them myself. That was pretty much how it went. Like Trump showed to the war fighters after what happened in Benghazi, he's not going to leave people behind to die. You don't think the war fighters that are under Trump appreciate that? I think he just kind of guaranteed their loyalty, Caesar style.
But Trump at the press conference again said, like, Kim Jong-un. It worked. We talked. There's no problem. There's no direct threat there. I mean, there's obviously a tension between North and South Korea. But Trump doesn't feel, and he hasn't mentioned really Kim Jong-un and the problems of North Korea. They fired some missiles when we were doing some naval exercises. What he did say today is that Europe wasn't there, Australia wasn't there, the UK wasn't there, Japan wasn't there, South Korea wasn't there. We have so many troops in South Korea, so many troops in Japan, so many troops in Germany. These nations didn't come to our rescue. I mean, he's used the opportunity to tear down NATO as a paper tiger more times a day. I mean, he's just throwing it under the bus at this point because he feels like he's got them. He's got Marco Rubio on his side. Marco Rubio literally was the lead author on the legislation in 2023 that said a president cannot unilaterally pull us out of NATO. He wanted the Congress to basically block a president's potential for doing that. Now, some people are saying that, is Trump really doing this? Is this talk? Is this building the base? It's definitely a propaganda effort, regardless of where this goes, what concrete steps they take. The question for Trump is, this is not America's top concern. But what,
Yeah, I agree. I think this is about creating the narrative to show how ineffective NATO is in order to get to withdraw from NATO and retrench it back on the Western continent, basically allowing, and I think the deal is Russia gets Europe, not in the way of invading, but Europe is going to be Russia's sphere of influence, and China has its sphere of influence. So we're seeing this resurgence of spheres of influence in the American-Russia-China relationship. Why are we putting up with all these Europeans, like, doing all these things? I think that's what the direction of travel is here. And like, I have on my X feed Ari Fleischer, who was George W. Bush's first press secretary, saying we need to get out of NATO. I think there's something going on here.
The NATO project. The real question, though, is how is he going to get this situation handled in Iran? And I think we all feel the tension there. At least I think it's hard not to. Maybe some people are totally comfortable with it. Trump's now saying he's going to escalate. There's been ideas of negotiations for a ceasefire. It was supposed to be like a 30 to 40-day ceasefire. And then there would be that, which would include reopening the Straits of Hormuz. Iran wants certain things. There seems to be a lot of daylight between both sides. But the more interesting thing is that the negotiations are being mediated by Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkey. And these are big members, three of the biggest members of the Islamic world. In terms of nations with substantial population, they're probably after Indonesia, but in terms of within this kind of Southwest, West Asia area, North Africa, West Asia, these are the three largest Muslim countries. It's not Britain, it's not France, it's not the United Nations, it's not some quartet. It is the major nations in the region. And I think no matter what happens with the kinetic engagement, that's the ultimate solution. Is Iran going to go to war with all of its Gulf partners and all of the Muslim world in defiance somehow because the United States is the great Satan and all of these nations are now working with and on behalf of, in terms of dialogue and in collaboration with the United States? So Trump's deadline is 8 p.m. tomorrow night. He's pushed it. I think that'll be 12 days total. He didn't want to do it, or 11 days total. Today was the 10th day of the deadline that he extended. He's going to be targeting apparently civilian infrastructure, energy, bridges, other kinds of facilities. Israel targeted a petrochemical plant today. Is this going to solve the problem? One of the most interesting things is, where do the people of Iran stand? There's been press coverage and reports and intelligence reports, that have been intercepted, or just news broadcasts in Iran. If you protest, you will be shot. So the clear danger of protesting is there. Trump apparently told Fox News that in January he was trying to arm the protesters, but the arms weren't effectively delivered. So, but what Trump said today in the press conference is that there's an interest from the Iranian people that we're engaged in talking with to do everything we possibly can to create the conditions where there's a potential shift in the regime in Iran. Now, the regime change program was a completely different project from the neocons. Changing a regime, which is hell-bent against you, is not a completely new idea. The question is, can it be effectively done? I don't think anybody knows the answer to this. This isn't John Bolton and the neocons regime change. They didn't get what they want. Trump, again, praised the president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez. That wasn't the regime change. That wasn't bringing in the regime change candidate and a whole new ideological regime. That was working with people on the ground. And that's what stands out with Iran. So we'll see what happens with this escalation. But I think the biggest shift is you see it in how Trump is saying paper tiger on NATO. The inverse of that is this question of, or the complementary side of that, is to say Trump is bashing these old European powers as impotent and incompetent, but he's then putting more and more responsibility on major players in the region that Iran has working relationships with. Pakistan has been someone they've had a working relationship with. Turkey is somebody, working relationship. I think maybe less Egypt, but still they're major players and they're not competing for the Gulf oil sales and so on. So there's also a question of what role ultimately the Pakistan negotiator recently made a trip to China to brief his counterpart, foreign minister in China, in Beijing. Pakistan has close ties to China. China's geopolitical route is part of their Belt and Road Initiative, which is...
And also they have a naval base, I believe, also. One of their few naval bases that China has is the one in Djibouti. And then the other one is located in Karachi, I believe, where they have a naval base. So Pakistan and China have a very close relationship. They also have the fact that India is sitting between the two of them, and both have had fights with India over the years. So that's kind of a situation there as well. So they have a very strong working relationship as well.
Largely just descended into a complete geopolitical and PR project. Their main partnership was with Pakistan, called the Chinese-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And this was supposed to ultimately give China access to Persian Gulf oil, independent of having to take the shipping routes through Southeast Asia around Thailand and Malaysia. I don't think that really has ever developed. There's instability in Pakistan, including in Western Pakistan, Baluchistan. There's problems there. How far these projects have actually advanced is unclear. A lot of them have been stalled. India, though, has also been involved in direct negotiations with Iran. They're also a big buyer of oil out of the Straits. They've also were partnering with Iran to some extent. One was a connection to Afghanistan. One was a north-south corridor up into Russia and Europe from India, part of India's kind of geopolitical play in response to the Belt and Road. But these countries are major purchasers. Japan, major purchaser. South Korea, major buyer of straight oil and gas out of the Straits. So these nations are also going to be having to play a role in where this thing goes. And they may not want to, they may not want to get their hands dirty, but these countries, I mean, maybe Europe will organize itself to some degree to be coherent, but these nations are going to play a significant part, and they don't have the baggage, the old colonial baggage that some of these European, like France and Britain, have in the region. So we'll see how Trump continues to unfold that. It's worth remembering in the national security strategy that Trump put out last year in October, November, there was another document that was then leaked that was supposedly part of kind of a drafting concept of the national security strategy. This is a national security strategy where Trump doesn't put huge emphasis on the Middle East, puts more focus on East Asia and China.
I just found it kind of interesting down here in the corner. There's a thing called New World Order and a note from Wikipedia. It's always interesting to see why is Wikipedia always at the top of a search result in Google, and it's because Wikipedia is basically run by a lot of its site is controlled by intelligence agencies and multiple. So a lot of the controversial stuff will be controlled by Langley. If it's in Russian, it's done by the SVU. So all the foreign language sites, all these places that we use Wikipedia for, you just can't trust a lot of the information there because it's been being all the people who are controlling it are their editors. Half of them are working for Langley, half of them are working for the FBI, half of them are working for in Russia and France. It's the DGSE, all these different organizations, and I just find it weird. So we just have this thing here for Wikipedia now. Notes are being led there, and of course, it led me immediately to the New World Order Wikipedia page when I pressed on it, but I just thought that was interesting. I'm going to finish this video. I was thinking of increasing the speed. So I'm going to try the playback speed at 1.25 and see if that works better or allow us to get through it a little quicker.
Pulls off, basically asks Europe, why is it going into civilizational erasure? And then most of its emphasis was on the Western Hemisphere and rebuilding industry.
Oh, yeah. So he's talking about the national security strategy document. And I found it very interesting that my one group of my book club never covered that. We were, which is with Rich Barrett's of the People's Pundit has book club that I'm in. And we never covered that particular document. Rich does have a very busy schedule, especially with his kids in their teenage years. But he does, we never covered that, but we did on my two-way group. We sat down and we went through the entire document, and it was very interesting for us to see kind of that thing. And we're very politically minded on that thing. And it's also, you have some Democrats who still will hang out with us. We haven't chased them all away. So, it's good in that regard.
In the United States. That's where the actual focus was for the national security strategy. This other document that came out had a focus, though, of what was going to stabilize this new kind of global structure. Now, a lot of people are talking spheres of influence, but spheres of influence is an old kind of imperial game. But there is a concept that you need major nations with major standing who don't share in all areas by any means, but are willing to recognize that it's not a question of so-called an international rules-based order. It's not some liberal lawyer-based construct of how we're all supposed to operate that ultimately is just a shroud for, illicit operations on every side, whether it's Chinese triads or massive free trade product dumping to all the games that the globalists were playing in the Atlantic. And what this other document that was leaked from the national security grouping and State Department that was writing this document was called the Core Six. And that was that the 6 nations which have strategic, economic, and political weight going forward because of Europe's inflicted destruction are the United States, Russia, China, India, and Japan. Wait, is that 6? I guess Core 5.
Yeah.
I don't know why I kept saying 6. Core 5. So, and I think that that's within, at least that's the lens that some people in the Trump administration are moving towards. I don't want to say I've been inside President Trump's mind, but that is a coherent structure. It's something we've been working with as a concept for probably about 20 years, is that you need something, because part of it is that if the British Empire and globalists can isolate any one great nation, then they will eventually be able to weaken that country. Right now, we're going strong under President Trump with an aggressive attack on the globalists. We can all see beyond President Trump's administration, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now, that the political instabilities in the United States will get increasingly manipulated, and there will be no person like President Trump that pulls a political coalition.
Just pausing to say hi to Carrie Combs. Thanks for coming by.
Together by by force of personality alone, which has kind of just been an amazing phenomenon. And that's why you have to back this guy up. You have to, in many ways, because what he has done as an individual is just irreplaceable. Part of it is that you need at least a recognition that we are ending this globalist program. So we'll see if this core 5 concept evolves. We do have classes on this channel. If you want to check it out on YouTube, you can check out the core 5. I don't know what else they're listed at. Tony Papert was involved in those. If he wants to put a link in there for some of those classes and people are interested, we've done some of the historical kind of development of how this has emerged. So, okay, so that's the Iran situation. We'll see what happens and unfolds Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's obviously going to escalate given the circumstances right now. Trump's got to find an off-ramp, but it's Trump's timing. He's got this perspective. He knows he's got to walk away at some point. And part of Iran's manipulation, much like the kind of masochist psychologically, their whole thing is that we're a glutton for punishment. And the more you beat us up, the more hostile we become, then you'll never feel like you gained victory. You'll just feel like you inflicted massive amounts of destruction. So it's hard. Can we create a constructive environment in Iran from this kind of intervention? President Trump knows just sitting back and doing nothing wasn't going to work. Now, the opposite is maybe true with Ukraine. We basically have pulled back, let the Europeans try to get at it. We've exposed NATO now as this kind of pointless construct simply on paper in documents. It has no teeth. It has
Yeah, and for people who are going around saying there's no plan, we've been seeing evidence of a plan for a long time, starting with the Maduro thing. So the Maduro thing whisks off to New York, where they kill off all his bodyguard, Cuban bodyguard, and so go getting into the idea that there's a Praetorian group out there. There's also this idea that many presidents and other people are always surrounded by bodyguards that force them into doing things in the way that the Praetorians want, and not the thing. But we've also seen all the protesters got crushed in Iran before the airstrike. If you wanted to, when this airstrike made most sense, if you were trying to topple the regime in the way that you would have done it during the protest, but the protest is gone, and now you're doing this airstrike, and they basically burned up all those intelligence assets were burned in the revolt, in the personal revolt. Now we're seeing this, so we're definitely seeing phases of execution. It looks like I think Cuba's going to be next. Is the kind of consensus I'm hearing, is that we're going to take out Cuba because now their only source of revenue is humanitarian support from Russia. They did get a boat in there so that people wouldn't starve to death, but they're negotiating the end of the ending of the embargo and bringing back Cubans to the rest of the world. And that will be, I think, is the next thing.
UK literally had to borrow a German ship to run a NATO exercise. They didn't have any battleships. They sent one battleship to Cyprus. They had no other battleships or frigates available. They had to borrow one from Germany to run a NATO exercise. They're basically just borrowing from Peter to make Paul look a little better. There's no abundance. There's no security. There's no wealth. There's no vision coming from Europe at all. And Orban's having an election this weekend. We'll see how that plays out. That will be a huge test to the insurgency against this EU globalist British structure. But the Ukraine situation is worth just putting in context. In February, Zelensky came out and said that basically the administration has told him Trump wants this war over by June. The midterms are a factor. And what's been told to Zelensky is that we are only going to give you security guarantees once the war is over. And Rubio said this when he was at a NATO summit in Denmark last week. If you want security guarantees, the war has to be over. We're not going to give them to you during the war because that would bring us into the war. And he's been told secondarily, the longer this war goes on, the less security guarantees you're going to get. That this is dwindling.
Yeah.
So you push this longer and longer, we have an incentive to say you're just on your own. You just want to keep fighting it out? Go ahead and keep fighting it. The Russian sticking point is that they want the Ukrainian troops to retreat out of the Donetsk province and give all of the Donetsk to Russian control. They're willing to take and split the other two Western provinces. They want all of Luhansk and Donetsk. That's where this stands. But more interesting is Trump's sense of timing. He wants this done by June. It's not far away at this point. It's just a couple of months. The Serbians found an attempt to blow up the Turk Stream pipeline that goes from Russia into Turkey and then into Southeast Europe through Bulgaria, Serbia, and then into Hungary. Hungary still gets 60% of its oil from this one pipeline. The other pipeline coming through Ukraine is shut down. And so that makes the Hungarian elections this weekend a huge power play on this whole question of where are the people of Europe? Can Orban and his party and movement withstand all of these meddling? And of course, President Trump has endorsed them. That relationship with Russia would be a significant shift. It would be part of this core five shifting point because we hold much more in common. And there is a faction who wants to declare itself the leading MAGA faction. This is the Ben Shapiro types, the Laura Loomer types. You've got a whole grouping online that want to consider themselves the gatekeepers, that MAGA is attempting to be infiltrated by people that want the United States or are somehow promoting Russia, Chinese, other interests into MAGA. And I think it's just worth stating, there's two different questions here. There is U.S. interests, and there is the interests of the United States to have a system in place among nations that is overtly, explicitly stated, opposed to globalism and the antics to pull us into world war, to destroy our populations, to drug us to death.
Yeah, well, we can clearly see Ben Shapiro and Laura Loomer are definitely on their way down in terms of influence. Like he's lost, Ben Shapiro especially, he's lost so many subscribers. And basically, Laura Loomer is working for Israel. I think that's pretty well clear by now. She's taking money from Assad.
To undercut the manufacturing and sovereign industrial powers of a country. Like that's what we're recruiting people to. We'd like to recruit Europe to that. There's no chance in hell under current Europe organization, we're going to get the nations of Europe to support that in an aggressive long-term way. These other countries, however, as much as we might have disagreements with India or China or Russia or Japan, could see the interests of this kind of structure of a sovereign nation state system. And I think this is going to be part of the ongoing political battle of where does MAGA, where does this movement that has been the most extraordinary political movement really in human history, the potential it has to shift the world from the precipice of a deep hell, a deep dark age, back to the heavens and back to development is extraordinary. This is going to become part of the fights. Trump resolving that Ukraine conflict is going to be huge. Him weakening NATO is part of that. Because the real question, of course, is ending aggressive conflicts, ending these ideological strongholds like Iran, and creating a long-term collaborative partnership. Where possible, but a system based on the nation state. Because the United States' potential, and I've done a couple of videos on this, the Western Hemisphere alone is one of the richest areas of fresh water supply, farmland, population. We have about 1 billion people in the Western Hemisphere. About 1 billion people in the Western Hemisphere.
And all the rivers. So the navigable, the Mississippi just reduces shipping costs by a staggering amount of money. And if we'll be seeing more return of proper river barges down that thing, and in the Great Lakes, we're just going to be seeing an explosion of shipping inside of Canada and the United States because of all the rivers that we both your rivers and most of our Great Lakes, right? In the St. Lawrence Seaway. This is going to be a real economic boom for both of us.
And that can grow. Lots of land area, lots of resources, farmland, fresh water. This is why Trump has put an emphasis on this, because that has always been the case. There's a great potential for, if you have an industrial orientation, if you have a shared trade system based on American industrial and scientific standards, and you're collaborating on these levels, then you secure long-term American interests. And you make it so that the United States can continue to be a force for good in the world based on similar capabilities that other regions have in the world that are going to have to apply similar American-style methods to bring that to bear, like Japan and South Korea did after World War II. The leading edge of that is to fundamentally change from the United States as the enforcer of globalism, as the great market of illicit narcotics, because we're a bunch of drugged up, idiot liberals and broken down, beat up, blue-collar Americans who have had their jobs and lives and towns and companies destroyed by Wall Street and these financial predators and globalist class. So we're self-medicating.
Yeah.
Instead of being that America, we're now going to go back to the true America. What indicates the true America more than the moonshot?
Yep.
More than mankind leading America leading man.
For anyone who just watched the TV show, we had full For All Mankind on Apple TV, and yeah, that show is great in the sense that you have basically an alternate history where none of this globalist stuff happens, and we get into the space and get to the moon and Mars, and do all this incredible stuff, and it shapes the future history of the world. Reagan comes to power sooner, but yeah, it was that kind of prepping us for the now. That show is part of the psyop to get us prepared for what's coming next when we're going back to the moon and Mars and to do the other thing because it's hard. Yeah.
Mankind into the exploration of the stars, into the heavens. This is where we are at our best. We did it with the rescue mission in Iran. That was extraordinary. But we did it with Apollo 13. We're doing it today with Artemis 2. Between today and Artemis 4, the actual manned landing on the moon in 2028, a little less than 2 years from now, I think it's planned for February. We're on a 10-month cadence of launches. We'll have 10 months, we'll do a launch to test the lander interface with the Orion module so we can move into the landers and just prepare for the actual landing. So we'll be landing in about 22 months in February of 2028. But in between today and that landing, we are going to have a launch every single month of orbital satellites for communications and optics, ground communication systems, ground powered systems, both solar and nuclear, autonomous rovers, autonomous helicopters, surface improvement equipment. We're going to have autonomous robotic equipment. An interesting thing about one of the things I did with moon rock was at one point they said, what happens when you put it into some of this moon dust, this regolith? It's kind of a sticky rock kind of soil. They said, what happens if you put it in a microwave? And so when they did, it kind of had the effect of turning it into a hardened cement. So there's been all kinds of studies on different types of equipment that could be used using microwave radiation to create landing locations, habitable structures for bases, for equipment, for greenhouses. Can we build robotics and equipment that can use this property of lunar soil? So they're going to be at least bringing these kinds of things. It's called CLIPS. So it's multiple satellite deployments, one every month, deploying rovers, equipment, helicopters, satellite communication, energy equipment. And then eventually, once we're getting human beings on there, it'll be larger, more robust equipment, vacuum sealed rovers, so you can operate in more kind of,
Yeah, I was watching this channel the other day, and it was all about showing that kind of stuff. So because I'm very interested in the space program, but also just the fact that it is coming up more and more in the show. I think the future of great power competition will be off-world. It will not be what we see here, and I hope we will see in my lifetime a lunar base. It's coming by 2032 is when they're going to think the lunar base will be completed, and we will have permanent inhabitation on the moon. Now, you probably won't be there all the time. You'll probably rotate out every 6 months because of gravity issues. But yeah, that is definitely what we're looking at. Moon base alpha will be a thing.
You don't have to operate within a spacesuit the whole time while you're exploring the surface. There's going to be larger and larger equipment as we build for a permanent base, shooting for a permanent base by the mid 2030s. So the cadence of manned launches will be then it'll be every 10 months for the next 2 years, and then it'll go to every 6 months, with probably a launch every single month for logistics, supplies, robotics, and mining equipment, everything else. I say all that not just because it's cool to think about. Tell me, what about any of that equipment couldn't be used on Earth? I mean, obviously, microwave radiation of Earth's soil might not have the same effect. I'm talking about robotic construction equipment, various advanced, optics for, right now they're using a laser-based communication structure from Orion to Earth. Laser-based communication systems, making that domestic and consumer. Other robotic capabilities, smaller, effective nuclear power plant distribution systems for emergencies, for just the general nuclear industry, for an export product to other parts of the world to help areas which are poor. They don't necessarily have the ability to invest into large power plants, or have a large demand for it, building the power supply they need in 10 megawatts or 100 megawatts or 300 megawatts, getting that kind of small modular reactor kind of process going. The spin-offs from Apollo were massive. The technology from, probably GPS eventually, Bluetooth, but a number of things, CAT scans, medical technologies. If we're actually going to be developing in a permanent presence, medical capabilities, atmospheric capabilities, controlled environments, robotics, construction, all of that is going to require pushing the envelope and then figuring out how to then, for a lot of companies, a lot of the engineers, how to make products that are useful for advancing the cause of building heaven on earth, of reindustrializing our country, building up the Western Hemisphere, kind of what some call, I think it's pejorative, Fortress America, but building up the Americas as a standout for what it means to have a system of sovereign nations based on the American methods and American technology and a commitment to industrialize around the talents of your people, to build up the resources and potential of your nation through your people to provide a better future for the coming generations. And so that's why the space program illustrates, once again, for many people, it recaptures the imagination that if you thought America was dead, we were a dead country, as Trump says, we were a dead country, now we're the hottest country anywhere. But for many people, that might sound like good talk. It's certainly good salesmanship. It's good PR. America taking the lead again of pushing the boundaries of human exploration has an extraordinary impact. And if that is in tandem, unlike it was in 69 or 72, with a robust commitment to follow through with the true principles of the American system. Instead, we dropped all of that. We went hippie, we went crackhead in many ways. If it's now going to be, if the spear tip is now going to have that spear shaft for that weight and volume following through, we're not just going to reindustrialize the United States. We are really setting a course for a different trajectory of mankind on planet Earth. And that's really the question. That's the point. And to me, it's that tension between the Iran attack, which brings up all of the horrors and tensions of mistakes made by our foreign policy establishment 25 years ago, and the recklessness, but that it's not being done from the standpoint of maintaining a globalist world order. The exact opposite. This aggressive approach with Iran is done to eradicate. And we got to find some way. And if it's brute force, then it's going to be brute force. It's one of those things. If you got to get her done, then you get her done. Even if it's just, tons of brute force kind of concept. I wish it weren't the case. I think that's what Trump also sees is like, what's wrong with these madmen? But it's understanding where mankind is going again and where the United States is leading again that puts that in I think, the right perspective. So that's compositionally what I wanted to say tonight.
Yeah, so there you have it. That was kind of my review of this stuff. So I want to thank all the people who stopped by today and commented and liked and shared and saw the stuff. All 4 viewers that we're currently here, welcome. Yeah, so this is only, I tend to usually stream a little bit longer, but I had a doctor's appointment today that took up a lot of time, so a lot more time than I thought it would. So I'm going to be signing off here, but if you like this stuff, like, share, subscribe, check out my locals page. I should be updating all these videos to there probably tonight. So need to get caught back up on all the episodes. But I want to thank everyone who stopped by, gave a like, give a comment, and yeah. So this is good night, agents. See you tomorrow on when I do my thing there, and maybe I'll do a commentary on. You know what? I could do that. I didn't really think about that. Where is this? That space stuff I was just talking about. Space flight now, I believe it is. Yeah, no. So where is it? Yeah, they covered that. So here we go. Artemis 2. You know what? I think I will just leave it there, guys. But I'll be sure to incorporate that in tomorrow's show. Thanks for stopping by and giving that. And I'll see you guys tomorrow on the next episode.